Durand ears covered as he mentally counted down. The expected explosion ripped through the air, sending him to the ground from the force. He hadn't gotten quite as far away from the initial blast as he'd have liked, but it seemed to have done its job. Not only did he see chunks of earth flying, but darker hunks of what could only be one of the enemy. Not bothering to congratulate himself, the veteran dodged his way around the landscape. He hoped to set off another charge where it would do him most good. He used up a good supply of bottle rockets earlier on the air assault. His efforts had at least helped the others, or so he hoped. If nothing else, it had caused a nice distraction. But now he focused more on the ground. There seemed to be more revenants landbound than those who could fly. Perhaps it was a matter of difference in ability, skill, and strength. He wasn't sure, nor did he care. He was too busy packing the next mortar into a depression of dirt. The small detonator he placed on the thing had a short countdown. Despite that, it had enough bang to break through the metal shell of the artillery round. He knew those things would come in handy someday. And with hidden stashes around the base of the mountain, he hoped he wouldn't run out of it that anytime soon. Seeing an approaching target, Walter set the timer and ran for it. If he timed things right, the thing wouldn't know what hit it, though part of him wondered how long it would take for the creatures to figure out what was going on, and what was causing it. At least his green and brown camo seemed to keep him from being too visible. The resulting blast ripped through the dark hide of its target. The thing exploded like a firecracker, sending out even more debris. Some of the fallout struck the veteran on the head, and if it weren't for the helmet he wore, it would have put him out for the count. Instead, it only stunned him, though he had to shake the daze from his eyes. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw Leslie and her group endlessly hacking and slashing at their targets. He'd have to make sure to steer clear of them for a bit so he wouldn't send any of them to high heaven with the next blast. Keeping that in mind, he raced to his next cache, hoping none of the enemy noticed him. Tyler swooped low over the ground near the gates. He managed to take down one of the flying foe he'd attracted. At least Callum still managed to keep up the facade over the path leading to the gates, he thought as he wheeled around. Smoke issued from the ground like a slow-moving mist. It mixed in with the darker clouds of burnt carbon from the fires raging up the mountains towards them. Their efforts had so far managed to keep the revenants from reaching the ruined city, though that could change at any time. He hadn't seen his brother since he'd started his defenses, which only went to show how skilled he was. Callum was, by all rights, a capable fighter, though Tyler hoped he wouldn't have to use those abilities. With his dragon sight, Tyler saw a trouble spot and dived down towards it. Several revenants were getting the best of an isolated group of mages. They were ridiculously outnumbered. He only thought it fair to even the odds a little. So he called out a warning before blasting out with dragon fire at the offensive creatures. His warning gave the mortals enough time to dive for cover. Obsidian ash flew up into the air with an acrid stench that upset more than a few stomachs. The Dragon Lord swooped into land. He immediately began attacking those who had survived his initial onslaught. His eyes glowed with power, and the mages he'd rescued charged to his aid. The revenant foot soldiers went down under a barrage of stones, exploding forward with dragon claws. Tyler pushed back up into the skies like the call of one of his kin. He wasn't sure which dragon had let out that blood-curdling death call, but he was more than willing to avenge her. He soon saw the cause of alarm, gaining more height to dive down on the wounded revenant to end its life. Mages fought from the ground as the dragon dove. They tried to divert the creature's attention so he could cause the most damage. Neither group expected the revenant to use their own abilities against them. They swathed the mages and dragons aside like flies. Tyler tried to backpedal mid-dive but couldn't. Gravity took over. He went down hard, causing the ground to shudder with the impact. Before he could recover from the fall, the revenant was on him. He clawed at his scales with a frenzy unlike any he'd encountered before. Blood welled up from the wounds on both dragon and revenant. The darker blood dripped like acid. Tyler tried to avoid the worst of it, fighting back as he was able. He whipped his tail around to smack the creature from behind, sending it stumbling. The movement gave him enough time to scramble to his feet. Despite the slight reprieve, his back leg threatened to buckle from the strain. He let out another bout of flame that scorched only half of his foe. It kept coming despite the wounds he'd inflicted. Blood dripped thickly from the burns and torn flesh, splashing to the ground. In an attempt to scuttle away from the continued attack, Tyler managed to back himself into a corner. The creature swiped its blood-soaked claws towards him and dragged him down in agony. Anwen felt her heart palpitate painfully. It squeezed the breath from her lungs as fire coursed through her veins. She gasped out loud as pain similar to her soul scars flared with white-hot agony. But instead of centering on her limbs, the pain hit her side and chest.
No!
She exclaimed as she doubled over, realizing what it meant. She screamed. The crystal sword fell from her hand, leaving her unarmed. An image came to her mind as she lay on the ground, her whole body trembling. She could see Tyler wreathing on the ground like an agitated snake. Dark steam issued from a gaping wound across his side and middle. The wound frothed like an angry tide. Anwen screamed through soul speech. She only hoped he could hear her through the debilitating pain of the revenant poison. She could barely concentrate from their shared connection. More pain ripped across her chest, a mirror of his own. The pain continued to build as the poison wormed its way into Tyler's bloodstream. Anwen closed her eyes and saw Tyler as he tried to make his body be still. Overhead, the revenant had called out in triumph. It knew its opponent would not last long. Already, black blood oozed from the steaming wounds. It was evident of the poison's hold on its victim. Unfortunately for it, the wounds the dragon had inflicted would soon claim its own life as well.
Courtney!
Anwen pleaded, trying to reach her mage friend, not sure if her soul speech would reach her or not. Having experienced such pain before, she cleared a small part of her mind to try and figure out a way to save Tyler. She knew he didn't have much time, taking no thought to her own survival.
Anwen?
The reply was faint. Through their tenuous connection, the Cicada got a small impression of the blonde's thoughts. Despite having been dragged back earlier, the mage was now back on the ground. She was besotted with enemies and was unable to come to her friend's aid. The Cicada didn't know what else to do. Walter likely wouldn't hear her calls, even if she had strength enough to try. Somehow managing to roll over onto her back, Anwen pressed her fists into her closed eyes. She tried to concentrate on the image of her mother. If she could block out the pain, she should be able to call up her mother's apparition like before.
Mom! Help me!
Margo Pack seemed to swirl into existence as the ring Anwen wore began to glow with an emerald light.
Stand up!
Margo commanded her daughter in an all-too-familiar tone.
Stand up or you will both die!
All around them, the dragons and mages fought against the encroaching revenants. Many were wounded, fighting with the strength of desperation. Others lay lifeless on the blood-spattered ground. There seemed to be a small bubble of clear space where Anwen lay. It was almost as if some barrier kept any harm from coming near.
I will shield you, but you must stand up.
Margo asserted.
Retrieve your sword. You will need it.
Anwen inched her fingers towards the falling crystal blade. It lay, glowing dimly in the half-light. It seemed to take forever for her fingers to reach the silver metal and grasp the hilt. Only a little less slowly, she drew the sword towards her body and used it as a crutch to regain her feet. Even with the support, she stood hunched over, clutching at her ribs where the fire burned the hottest.
Now go.
Margo instructed as she stood by her daughter.
Go to Tyler. Now.
Walking like an old woman, Anwen used the sword to steady her steps as she made her way towards her companion. The fighting continued around her, but never quite reached her. She felt the shield follow her. The outside violence crashed against it like water against stone. Even with the uneven ground beneath her, this caused her to stumble even more. After what felt like an eternity, she reached Tyler's side. She never faltered on which direction she should take. Tears almost blinded her as she saw the gash down his side. The scales darkened near the opening. Her feet faltered and she went down, gasping as she retched.
I can't do this.
Anwen balked. She felt too dizzy and faint.
I don't know how to save him.
Open your eyes.
Margo commanded. Anwen clenched her fists, her knuckles going white around the sword hilt.
My eyes are open.
She yelled back.
I don't understand what you want me to do.
Margo's image flickered like something had disturbed her energy.
See what he would see.
With a jolt, Anwen understood. She was a dragon mage, but more than just that. She was the Cicada and had been gifted with dragon sight through the use of the diviner sage. Trying to calm her pounding heart, she willed the shared pain away. She knew it was nothing more than a resonant echo, His pain was hers, but she could still shut out most of it if she tried hard enough. She distanced herself from any emotions or other sensations as she closed her eyes. A shudder ran through her body as she called upon the ability she still could not control. Opening her eyes, her vision clouded. There was a taint in the air, but once she pushed past it, she could see.
First, you must stop the bleeding.
Everything took on a luminescent quality as her eyes focused, almost like she looked through a film negative. She looked not on the outward appearance, but the atomic one. The wound in Tyler's side pulsed with angry, raw energy, red edging the ripped flesh with a sickly hue.
Now mend the flesh.
Margo instructed. She reached out a ghostly hand to touch her daughter's forehead with one finger. Images flowed into Anwen's mind. She nodded as everything fell into place.
I'll try.
She responded. She reached out her trembling hands to rest against Tyler's side. Tyler shuddered underneath her touch. Raw heat spread from the 2 points of contact as she cajoled his dense hide to seal the wound. The pain lessened slightly as the pressure faded, but the poison still bubbled inside him, and he knew there was no way she could stop it. At best, she had bought them a small measure of time. Anwen's body felt numb as she removed her hands from Tyler's side. She felt her consciousness trying to slide away from her and quickly grasped at it, holding on. It felt like a bucking horse that she refused to let go, willing it to settle. Just like her stomach. She would not let it end like this. Not like this.